All right, what's going on, folks? What's happening? Here we have another late night edition of a value conversation, Gen X, and you know it, folks. So let's go ahead and get into it with we know our opening line. Find somebody who knows somebody to tell somebody about what we've got going on over here. If you like it, let me know. Share it if you do, and subscribe if this is what you're looking for. So tonight's topic, I'm just going to go ahead and get into it. I don't want to hold everybody long because I know some of you have to get up for work, and I'm trying not to get into that habit of doing some late night broadcasting. But I saw something about a week or so ago that I've been meaning to address, but things have just gotten in the way. Before we go any further, shout out here to my replay gang who's probably going to be watching this because I don't expect too many people to be on right now. But if anybody shows up, hey, I appreciate it. Otherwise, you know you can catch everything in the replay. So, the title of today's show, Black Miseducation via Disinformation. Something that I am really growing more and more annoyed with here is watching Black content creators mislead and miseducate other Blacks who don't pick up books, who don't follow contemporary information that's going on right about now. They don't stay up to date with current affairs. So, the idea that a majority of them have is that if it's a Black face talking, it must be true. Now, we've experienced that all throughout last year, where we had Kamala Harris isn't Black. Well, that's primarily one of the things that really torqued me, just watching people continuously pushing that argument around. Oh, Candace Owens was right. No, Candace Owens was not right. Candace Owens was disproved multiple times when she came out with that nonsense. Even I put something together showing that she was lying. Yes, I said it, lying. There's no other way to put that. Dennis Spurling added to it by making a statement such as being the Ku Klux Klan was the military wing of the Democratic Party. Nothing was further from the truth on both occasions. Then, of course, there was Byron Donalds, senator from Florida, who made the statement, Blacks were more united under Jim Crow. No, it wasn't that Blacks were more united under Jim Crow. Blacks were more united under Jim Crow due to the constant threat of death. But you only get half the story. And that's where tonight's show comes from. Dennis Spurling, once again, putting out half the story. Now, FYI, to some of you who may not be aware, Dennis Spurling is one of these Black conservative. Well, he says he's not conservative. He says he's independent, and he tells people, vote your interest, vote your interest. So I'll just simply say his actions point more to Black conservatism, which means that you are prone to misinformation. Why? Because the majority of their commentary is predicated over the fact that the switching of Democratic and Republican Party ideology did not happen. I'll say it again. The majority of his conversation when discussing Republicans and Democrats of today are predicated on the fact that he does not acknowledge that the switching of party ideologies between the Republicans and Democrats in the mid 60s did not, that it did happen. He feels that it did not. He says that it did not. You can get that from Angry Man, Kelly, who shows up on Fatty's show from time to time, Candace Owens as well, and many others across the conservative platform. Oh, that never happened. Yes, it did. I've documented it more than a few times, as well as just type it on the internet. Go to Google. Go to whatever your favorite search engine is. Type in Republican and Democratic Party switch, or party ideology switch, or the big switch. However you want to put this in here. This is something that Dennis Spurling particularly does not acknowledge. Therefore, when you hear him talk about today's Republican Party, he gives you the impression that the Republican Party today, as of May 22nd, 2025, is the same Republican Party back in 1865, shortly after the Civil War, even before the Civil War. He does not acknowledge the party switch that, for those of you who follow me, who know that there was a change in ideology amongst both parties, where you had the Southern Democrats, a.k.a. the descendants of all the racists, because the Democratic Party, yes, the Democratic Party as a whole was a racist party, completely against civil rights, completely against blacks having the same rights as whites. That party in 1965 saw a switch to where it's all the racists jumped ship from the Democratic Party and went to the Republican Party. Those Republicans who were annoyed that the Republican Party was starting to show interest in supporting civil rights did not want to do so. Therefore, the Republicans who did want to support civil rights went over to the Democratic Party. Now, I believe that information, again, is freely found if you know how to look for it. If not, I'll probably link in this video some of the previous videos I did sharing that information, maybe even a few links as well, once I take the video down for a moment just to go back and do a little editing. But for the most part, any information that you hear from Dennis Spurling that does not acknowledge the ideology switch of the Republican and the Democratic Party is garbage. All right, just drop it right then and there because it's reality that is not being recognized. All right, enough of that. So getting into this, Dennis Spurling made a statement that Malcolm X has said you can't trust white liberals. Now, I'm paraphrasing right now, but the problem here is that he did not present the full story. He did present the aspect of Malcolm X and what he believed in prior to his trip to Mecca, which was in or between April and May of 1964. I want to say April 13th, well, from April 13th to May 21st, he had gone over to the Middle East and actually traveled to Mecca, and he saw that Muslims were not just black people. They came in all different sizes, shapes, and colors. But again, this is something that Dennis Spurling does not make known in his video. I believe the full video was an hour and 25 minutes, but this part is what he clipped out that was quick to address at least that portion of what he had to say about Malcolm X and white people. Fair use, fair use.
That being the case, tonight's broadcast is entitled White Liberals Cannot Be Trusted. Okay, now, the reason is because today I want to share a story that epitomizes that very reason Malcolm X warned us not to trust white liberals who claim to be our allies. See, this isn't a history lesson, but it's a contemporary tale of hypocrisy and betrayal. It's about Joe Scarborough.
All right, he's talking about a story of hypocrisy and betrayal. Well, let's look at it. In actuality, it's a story about misleading and misrepresenting facts. That's what we're looking at. Now, the background of the video consists around Joe Scarborough and Mika Brzezinski, who, if you do not know, these are folks who host Morning Joe on MSNBC. They were friends about a decade or so with Donald Trump, so to speak, until he got involved in the political arena. Once Trump got involved in the political arena, that's when the friendship between the couple started separating to the point now that they were adversaries all throughout Barack Obama's presidency, as far as news coverage, to include even to this day, where they do not have a tendency to fall for any of Donald Trump's nonsense per se. But when they saw that Trump had won a second term, they had gone down to Mar-a-Lago to kiss the ring, or at least that's how it's presented. Now, again, I'm not going to put the entire podcast or stream here with the conversation of Mika and Joe here, because again, that's just the backdrop that Dennis was using to present his case or to misrepresent Malcolm X's words. Let's go ahead and skip ahead to another part here where he continues in with his antics. Now, again, as I'm saying, the backdrop was Joe and Mika, and his conversation was about how they talked about, look at the people at Donald Trump's rally. Oh, they're out here cheering on Skitler, as he wanted to say. Well, we know what he meant, Hitler. But the conversation being made was that, oh, look at them. They talked all bad about him, but then you and your wife go down to Mar-a-Lago and kiss his ring. Now, in a different show, you'd find out that they basically stated they'd gone down there to see, well, what can we do to see how we can try and work with this administration through news coverage. Think about it this way. Trump would never come to them to ask for favorable news coverage, but they themselves went down there to ask them or to ask him and speak with him about news coverage. Why? Why go ahead and do this? We all went through that first administration of seeing what it was going to be like. This second time around, he came in prepared with Project 2025, to which he wasted no time implementing once he got in place. But still, this brief show that we're doing here is not about the two of them. It's about how Dennis Spurling utilized them to misrepresent the words of Malcolm X. Fair use, fair use.
I mean, they've been calling this man a Nazi. They said the folks who showed up in New York for the rally were not. I mean, look, I tell you all the time, vote your interest, okay? And the reason I tell you all vote your interest is because I've studied all of Black America's greats for long enough to realize that these folks are full of crap.
All right, so Dennis Spurling says he studied all the greats, right? So if you studied all the greats, then why don't you ensure that all the words that the greats have stated are made known to everyone instead of presenting a partial of the greats? So let's go ahead and just skip away from that. But that was, again, just the basis I wanted to get people to understand. Now, if you yourself want to go and watch the full show, this is just a small part of it. But if you were to type in on YouTube, Dennis Spurling and Malcolm X, you would get the full broadcast. But this was the segment that I was just interested in, that I want to lay the baseline of what I wanted to speak about. Now, the big thing here that I want folks to know, close it out here for a second. So what Dennis Spurling did not mention is that Malcolm X, excuse me, made a pilgrimage to Mecca in Saudi Arabia. He went to a few other areas while he was over there in between April and May of 1964. Matter of fact, he was there in Washington when the 1964 Civil Rights Act was signed, and he did meet with Martin Luther King. Now, him and Martin Luther King, although they wanted blacks to achieve the same thing, which was their freedom, their equality in America, they had two different approaches. Nonviolence was more of Martin Luther King's approach, and action that would culminate potential violence was what Malcolm X stood for. Now, at the same time, Malcolm X was for separation from the white race, separate but equal. He was all about that before he went to Mecca. Now, as you saw with Dennis Spurling was saying that Malcolm X told us not to trust these white people. Yes, the earlier version, the pre-Mecca version of Malcolm X spoke that. But the version of Malcolm X who went to Mecca and saw that there were people who worshiped Islam from different races, from different countries, that was a different man. So that is why I say Black miseducation by disinformation. If Spurling actually studied the work of the greats, he would have known this and he would have mentioned that. But he did not, for the purpose of supporting his narrative. Let's go ahead and step into this. So I just happened to type in Malcolm X and trip to Mecca, and this is what came back. In April 1964, Malcolm X embarked on a pilgrimage to Mecca, known as the Hajj. This journey dramatically altered his worldview, leading him to abandon his earlier beliefs in Black separatism and violence. He converted to Sunni Islam and adopted the name El Hajj Malik El Shabazz. All right, so here's some additional information here that we can pick from this. His experience in Mecca led him to reevaluate his beliefs, abandoning his previous separatist views and embracing a more inclusive vision of humanity. He began to view, and again, this is under new perspective, he began to view Islam as a means of overcoming racial problems and achieving unity, stating that color ceases to be a determining factor of a man's worth or value once he becomes Muslim. And later life. Following his return, Malcolm X continued to advocate for equality and human rights through his approach, though his approach shifted significantly from his previous separatist stance. It says, according to Wikipedia. Now, there are other places that will provide this information if you know where to look for it. But this is just a short blast that I want to give everyone. So it wets your whistle, so to speak. Now, I was hoping to have ChicagoRilla to be available. You have to excuse me here. I'm wearing my braces, my Invisalign. So if you hear me stumbling over my words, it's just because of the fact I didn't take my liners out. So excuse me for that. As I was saying, I was hoping to have Rilla on with me tonight, but he had another engagement things to deal with because of the fact that at the age of 19, if you call him stating, he was really immersed into the world of Malcolm X. So what we will potentially look at is going back over this when Rilla has time, and he can give you the perspective of how Malcolm X was an influence in his life. So think of me as just giving you the first wave or the first round, right? The initial immersion, if you're not familiar with Malcolm X and his work and what he stood for during the course of the civil rights movement. All right, so this next entry I made inside of Google was specifically to give people more information that Dennis Spurling did not give when, again, he stated that Malcolm X warned us about liberal whites. Malcolm X's view on working with whites evolved throughout his life. Initially, during his time with the Nation of Islam, he advocated for Black separation and self sufficiency, often criticizing whites as the root cause of racial inequality. However, after his pilgrimage to Mecca and a subsequent split from the Nation of Islam, Malcolm X's perspective shifted, emphasizing the need for unity and collaboration with whites who were genuinely interested in dismantling racism. Mm. All right, so you see what I'm talking about when I mention black black miseducation via disinformation. It was damn near, if not intentional, for Dennis Spurling to mislead everybody. He studied the greats. You heard it just like I did, having studied all the greats. He should have known that Malcolm X's trip to Mecca made him a different man, but he did not say that. Instead, Malcolm X warned us about white liberals. They're full of crap. All right, fair use. You saw it. His words, not mine. So here we go. Let's do this. I've got a couple more things here because I said this is going to be a short run tonight. So I typed in Malcolm X, thoughts of whites, and after Mecca, and this is what came back. Before Mecca, Malcolm X, as a prominent figure in the Nation of Islam, initially held strong anti-white sentiments, viewing white people as inherently evil. During and after Mecca, excuse me, transformation, the experience of Hajj, where he witnessed people of all races, including those who would be considered white in America, worshiping and interacting as equals, deeply affected him. Brotherhood. He was struck by the genuine sense of brotherhood he experienced with Muslims of all colors, leading him to reconsider his previous views. Shift in perspective. Malcolm X began to differentiate between individual white people and the system of racism that he previously blamed on all whites. Islam as a solution. He came to believe that Islam could be a potential solution to racial problems, as it had fostered unity and equality among diverse people in the Muslim world. letter from Mecca, which, by the way, I went out and found. Of course, I had to read this. All right. I need to make sure that everyone understands that the perspective of Malcolm X presented by Dennis Spurling is inaccurate. In his famous letter from Mecca, Malcolm X wrote about his changed perspective, noting that the white attitude was removed from the minds of the Muslims he encountered through their faith. Continued struggle against racism, not an end to the struggle. While Malcolm X's views on white people evolved, he remained a fervent advocate for Black liberation and racial justice, focused on systemic racism. He began to focus more on dismantling the systems of oppression that perpetuated racial inequality. Organization of Afro-American Unity. Upon his return, Malcolm X founded the Organization of Afro-American Unity, a secular group aimed at achieving Black empowerment. In essence, Malcolm X's pilgrimage to Mecca marked a turning point in his life, leading to a more nuanced understanding of race and the potential for brotherhood across racial lines, while reinforcing his commitment to fighting against systemic racism and oppression. I can't say it any better from that perspective right there, folks, can I? You've read the same information that I've gone out and found that I'm sharing with you all right now. And you should see that it is inconsistent with the presentation of Malcolm X that Dennis Spurling put forward in that video. All right, last but not least, let's take a look at the letter that Malcolm X wrote while he was on his pilgrimage. Malcolm X's letter from Mecca, April 20th, 1964. Never have I witnessed such sincere hospitality and the overwhelming spirit of true brotherhood as practiced by people of all colors and races here in this ancient Holy Land, the home of Abraham, Muhammad, and all other prophets of the Holy Scriptures. For the past week, I have been utterly speechless and spellbound by the graciousness I see displayed all around me by people of all colors. I have been blessed to visit the holy city of Mecca. I have made my 7 circuits around the Kaaba, led by a young mutwa named Muhammad. I drank water from the well of Zemzem. I ran 7 times back and forth between the hills of Mount al-Safa and al-Marwa. So you'll have to excuse me if I'm pronouncing this wrong. I have prayed in the ancient city of Mina, and I have prayed on Mount Arafat. There were tens and thousands of pilgrims from all over the world. They were of all colors, from blue-eyed blondes to black-skinned Africans, but we were all participating in the same rituals, displaying a spirit of unity and brotherhood that my experiences in America had led me to believe never could exist between the white and non-white. America needs to understand Islam, because this is one religion that erases from its society the race problem. Throughout my travels in the Muslim world, I have met, talked to, and even eaten with people who in America would have considered white, but the white attitude was removed from their minds by the religion of Islam. I have never before seen sincere and true brotherhood practiced by all colors together, irrespective of their color. You may be shocked by these words coming from me, and I'm sure a lot of people were, because he was heavy on speaking the words of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad and Black separation from the white race. But on this pilgrimage, what I have seen and experienced has forced me to rearrange much of my thought patterns previously held and to toss aside some of my previous conclusions. So here we see right here where he is now taking into consideration what he had to say, what he felt, and what he preached about white people, from actually being in a place where everyone was the same based upon sharing the same religion. This was not too difficult for me. Despite my firm convictions, I have always been a man who tries to face facts and to accept the reality of life as new experiences and new knowledge unfolds it. I've always kept an open mind, which is necessary to the flexibility that must go hand in hand with every form of intelligent search for truth. During the past 11 days here in the Muslim world, I have eaten from the same plate, drunk from the same glass, and slept in the same bed or on the same rug, while praying to the same God with fellow Muslims whose eyes were the bluest of blue, whose hair was the blondest of blonde, and whose skin was the whitest of white. And in the same words and in the actions and in the deeds of the white Muslims, I felt the same sincerity that I felt among the Black African Muslims of Nigeria, Sudan, and Ghana. Now, this is one thing that I sometimes bring up when I hear Christians talk about, oh, my God is a powerful God. But I find it funny that the same God that Black Christians, the white Christians, or even the Christians that support Donald Trump, or what do they call them? The MAGA Christians, or Christian extremists, however you want to put it. Even the Ku Klux Klan holds up their Bible and talks about their belief in the mighty God. How is it that all four of these folks have the same God, but had, have different interpretations on what that God has in store for them? Again, you all know that I am a staunch atheist. I do not hide it, but I do not openly go out and discriminate against those who practice religions, other than when they come to me and try and talk to me about a Jesus that never existed. Different show, but I'll leave it right there. We were truly all the same brothers because their belief in one God had removed the white from their minds, the white from their behavior, and the white from their attitude. I could see from this that perhaps if white Americans could accept the oneness of God, then perhaps too they could accept in reality the oneness of man and cease to measure and hinder and harm others in terms of their differences in color. With racism plaguing America like an incurable cancer, the so-called Christian white American heart should be more receptive to a proven solution to such a destructive problem. Perhaps it could be in time to save America from imminent disaster, the same destruction brought upon Germany by racism that eventually destroyed the Germans themselves. Each hour in the Holy Land enables me to have greater spiritual insights into what is happening in America between Black and white. The American Negro never can be blamed for his racial animosities. He is only reacting to 400 years of conscious racism of the American whites. But as racism leads America up the suicide path, I do believe from the experience that I have had with them that the whites of the younger generation in the colleges and universities will see the handwriting on the wall, and many of them will turn to the spiritual path of truth, the only way left to America to ward off the disaster that racism inevitably must lead to. Never have I been so highly honored. Never have I been made to feel more humble and unworthy. Who would believe the blessings that have been heaped upon an American Negro? A few nights ago, a man who would be called in America a white man, a United Nations diplomat, an ambassador, a companion of kings, gave me his hotel suite, his bed. By this man, His Excellency Prince Faisal, who rules this holy land, was made aware of my presence here in Jeddah. The very next morning, Prince Faisal's son, in person, informed me that by the will and decree of his esteemed father, I was to be a state guest. The deputy chief of protocol himself took me before the Hajj court. His Holiness Sheikh Mohammed Harkan himself okayed my visit to Mecca. His Holiness gave me 2 books on Islam with his personal seal and autograph. And he told me that he prayed that I would be a successful preacher of Islam in America. A car, a driver, and a guide have been placed at my disposal, making it possible for me to travel about this holy land almost at will. The government provides air-conditioned quarters and servants in each city that I visit. Never would I have even thought of dreaming that I would ever be a recipient of such honors. Honors that in America would be bestowed upon a king, not a Negro. All praise is due to Allah, the Lord of all worlds. Sincerely, El-Hajj Malik El-Shabazz, Malcolm X. He had to go to a different country, a different part of the world, to get the simple respect of being seen as a man that he could not get in America. At this point in time, the current administration under Donald Trump is attempting to rewind and take away all of the advancements that have been made by Blacks in society as we know it. He is systemically working on reducing the Black voice. And if he is able to successfully do so, whereas in the public forum of conversation, any and all Black achievements are removed, who will be here to not tell the story, but to even validate the story? By claiming that Black works of art in the Smithsonian and the Boston Museum are divisive, biased, and dividing society because of racist, biased views, which are not substantiated. What happens? All right, what happens if he's successful with that? This is the time frame that Malcolm X and Martin Luther King lived in prior to 1964 passing of the Civil Rights Act and 1965 passing of the Voting Rights Act, which we saw in 2013, where a portion of that was struck down by the Supreme Court. Little by little, these things are being taken away. But moving back from that, moving back to Malcolm X, we can see his words. His words, all right? That's all I can say, his words. The joy, if you want to say that, the respect that he was given, him recognizing as a Black man, he was seen as prominent. He was recognized for who he was. A king acknowledged his presence. But of course, when you come back to America, what was the joke? What do you call a Black man who is a doctor, who has a prominent reputation, and lives in a nice house and drives a nice car? Forgive my language, but the end of the joke was you call him a nigger. Yes, that is what, no matter what is achieved by a Black man, that is how you were seen. But Malcolm X had the chance to see that in the right location, in the right setting, racism could be transcended. As he said, he saw Muslims of different colors, of different races, and they all worshiped one God. So give that a thought next time you happen to hear a Black content creator talking about Malcolm X, specifically Dennis Spurling. I think I presented enough information that anyone could draw a conclusion here that Dennis Spurling misrepresented the words of Malcolm X. Hey, what else can I say? You saw what I saw, and that's all I can say to add to this, all right? I think we're done here. So what else can I say? Find somebody who knows somebody to tell somebody about what we've got going on over here. If you like it, let us know. Share it if you do, and subscribe if this is what you're looking for. As always, thank you for joining me for the conversation. Jon H.E.N.R.Y out.